Okay, good morning, everyone. So we have today a wonderful personality, Professor James Thompson from Manchester, UK. Uh, James is a professor at University of Manchester, professor of applied and social theatre, and well, is one of the prominent personalities when it comes to applied theatre. A wonderful writer. He had written a very good books. Uh, and like we had a meeting, we keep chatting a lot about applied theater, a lot of things, but I think this James, this corona time gave us some opportunity to interact and find out something new, some exchange of ideas. And let's do it. So the basic idea is to understand more about applied theater and the kind of work that you do. So, to begin with, I would like to understand what is your idea of applied theater? What does applied theater mean to you?
That's the big $6 million question. Um, it's interesting that for me, many people have criticized the term applied theatre for saying that the word applied makes the theatre and the arts sound very instrumental.
Right,
It makes it sound like uh, a sticking plaster over a wound, or a hammer that you bang on something to solve a problem.
right,
Um, and I can understand some of that anxiety about the use of the term applied theatre. But for me, a couple of origins of when we first used the term applied theatre are quite important. The first is that when I first came across the term applied theatre is in the early 1990s. And it was used by the University of Exeter, and they had an applied drama course. And then we created an applied theatre course at the University of Manchester. And we have to remember, therefore, that the use of the word applied came from a university setting, and it was almost done tongue in cheek to make a comment on things like applied mathematics, applied
right.
physics. So it came from a discipline, it came from a place where the word applied simply referred to a somewhat more practical orientation in what is otherwise a theoretical discipline.
Yeah,
And it was used for theatre to say that most of the theatre training, certainly in the UK at that time, was done in the black boxes of university drama departments, in conservatoires. It was done within the buildings, and it wasn't necessarily connected with the community and the world outside. So the word applied there was to say, let's just take our work outside the black boxes of university drama departments and make it more relevant to the wider world. For me, there's another quick reason about what applied meant, is that I don't know how it works in other languages, but in sort of my understanding of English is applying oneself also means working hard at something. You
right.
know, this student applied himself well to the problem.
Yeah,
So also applying yourself also has that sense of working hard to make your work relevant.
right.
So applied theatre for me also meant that just in and of itself, we have no right for our art form to be relevant. We have to show that our work is relevant to the world.
Mhm.
So applied had that sense of really working hard to show how theatre could be an important art form for the world, for communities, for social problems. So it's that sense of apply yourself.
Yeah. So you mean that it is from theory to practice, and that's what Helen has written in her book, that
Yeah,
it is quite similar to applied mathematics and applied physics, kind of a thing. All right,
yeah,
wonderful. So going ahead, you have worked a lot with different diverse communities, and one of your core area of practice is drama for conflict resolution. So you work in a prison setting as well. You work in uh, wartime situations, communities with distress, and so how do you think like a drama for conflict resolution? How you take it as a methodology, or would you like to talk about the pedagogy of it?
That's a really good question. I originally was interested in theatre and conflict resolution because I was invited to work in the northern area of Sri Lanka during the
Yep.
Civil War. Um, and I worked particularly in the Tamil areas of northern Sri Lanka, Jaffna, around there.
Yeah.
And one thing, there was two types of theatre I became interested in that context very broadly. And I categorized them as theatre in spite of and theatre because of the
Yeah.
situation. And I was originally asked to do, and I think applied theatre traditionally is theatre because of. So you do theatre because there's a civil war, because there's suffering, because young people need a means of expression.
Right.
And theatre and conflict resolution often fell into that category. How can we use theatre to discuss people's problems, to tell stories that haven't been told before? How can we use theatre to help people from one community understand how another community is feeling, or the struggles that they might be facing?
Mm-hmm.
But then there was also this theatre in spite of, which I also became very interested in, and I think it is important for conflict resolution. Theatre in spite of is the sort of theatre you do, in a sense, as a relief from the situation you're in. That in spite of these terrible times we're facing, I still want to act in my play, to put on my musical, to have some fun with my friends.
Right.
And I thought what I was astounded by and impressed by in the areas in Sri Lanka particularly is the quality of the theatre done in spite of the situation they were in. And I think both these are important for conflict resolution, because actually being involved in the arts helps sustain you through a really difficult time. You know, if you're facing great problems, the arts can help you reflect on those problems, but also they can help you think about something else.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we're faced with great troubles, it's really important to reflect on them, but it's also important to have a break from them. And I really am interested in theatre that is also a break from, a relief from some of the things we're facing. That might be relevant today as well, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I think that's a wonderful viewpoint that you put forward. And here, I think I would like to just mention that uh, when you work in Sri Lanka, based on that, you have written the book called "Digging Up Stories." Am I right?
Yeah. Yes.
And just for everybody's knowledge, that's again another wonderful book that everyone, those who are interested in knowing more about applied theatre, should read. Well, I'm interviewing a big man, so I'm referring some questions over here. But just going uh, in between, when we talk about a conflict resolution, do you really think that theater can provide a resolution, or theater should provide a resolution?
I'm always a bit nervous about claiming a huge amount for theatre. I think theatre can be a component part of how communities move through a conflict and eventually come to some more peaceful or satisfactory situation. And the arts more generally can.
Yeah.
I don't think theatre in and of itself should claim too much. It needs to be a little bit humble about that it can play its part. One thing I think that's really important with theatre is when we make theatre, it's also how you listen to the stories of other people.
Right.
And I think one thing that theatre does really well is honour people's stories and perspective.
Yeah.
And if you can encourage communities to say that they have an important story, but this other community also has an important story, and both stories are to be honoured and to be respected, I think that is quite an important route through some difficult places.
Oh, that's a wonderful, uh, another different insight, because usually when, well, my experience is when we do applied theater work, participants demand for some kind of resolution. They are eagerly looking for, what is there for me. And
Yeah.
we as a facilitators more focused on the process rather than the outcome, and
Yeah.
that is something we need to stick on.
Yeah, I can't agree more. There's a for people who've done image theatre, which I know that
Yeah,
you've used, sort of Bois theatre. I, I it's for me when you create someone creates an image and you ask the community or the participants, what do you see here in this image?
yeah,
That the important thing for me isn't their answer. This image is a family in trouble. It's the fact that the second thing you ask is, tell me another story that you see. There is
absolutely.
the important thing is there's always two truth. There isn't this image equals full stop.
Correct.
There is this image equals, and it equals something else and something else. And being able to see multiple truths is I think is a real peace building skill.
Right.
If you only can see one truth, that is often the problem of violence and thing, because your truth is the singular correct one.
True. You're talking about a perspective.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So, going further, we would like to know more about In Place of War.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something you have the project you have initiated, and you have worked with different organizations at diverse places as well. So, would like to know more about it.
Yeah, In Place of War started as a research project. Again, it started with my work being invited to different conflict zones, originally Sri Lanka, but I've worked in many other international settings. And In Place of War really started as a question. It's really it is a respect. I'm a researcher, so it started as a question that asked, why do people create theatre and the other art forms in times of war? Many people would assume that your priority in a war zone is your personal safety, is shelter,
Right.
is security for your friends and family, um, uh, food, clothing, and those sort of things. But what we noticed in many contemporary war zones is people were also continuing to be involved in the arts. They were prioritizing the arts in their lives. So for me, that it's almost counterintuitive. And therefore, the research project was to ask the simple question, why do people keep making theatre? Why do people keep doing this?
Yeah.
And it wasn't from, I had an idea, I wasn't going, I know why. No, it was seriously, why do you keep doing it? And we just, the simple process of In Place of War was to say, go to international conflict zones and ask this question. And the first part of the project was simply documenting why people did that. And very much the book Performance in Place of War,
Yeah.
which is published by Seagull from Calcutta. That book was really a document of those different stories of why people created theatre in times of war. The project now is In Place of War has become its own arts organisation. It's now an NGO. It supports artists in war zones. It creates educational programs about arts in war, supporting younger artists who are trying to sort of set out on a new career. So it's now sort of moved from being a research project to its own arts organisation, and it continues. I've moved away from it in terms of its day-to-day work,
Right.
but I'm really proud that it's continuing.
That's great. So when you work with this different kind of communities who are basically going through some kind of operation, how do you negotiate the idea of performance with these communities? Is it important to negotiate this?
Yeah, I think it's very important to, where possible, to be invited by a community. I think it's very important to know that you've been invited into a community if you're not from that community. There are
Right.
many examples of theatre work done by coming from particular communities, and it's generated by themselves. If you're not from that community, I think it's really important to negotiate what the terms of your invitation may be. And that's sometimes easier and sometimes it's much harder. I think, for myself, I'm obviously from the UK. English is my first language.
Yeah.
And then in certain communities, being from the UK, having English as a first language, will present some problems, and certain times it will present some opportunities.
Yeah.
So in Northern Sri Lanka, I was invited there. The Tamil community wanted an international person because it was in the middle of the civil war. They were nervous in the sense they needed someone who wasn't from either community to run that work.
Mm-hmm.
That was helpful. In other places, me being an English speaker is not helpful.
Right.
So you need to think about, me being a white European is not helpful. And therefore it's better that, you think about who you are to be invited in. Always you have to negotiate and realize that you need permission, and you need to be careful about those sort of negotiations.
All right. So, that Helen said that applied theater is a fairly new idea, and she said almost 20 years back. But when you consider India or different Asian countries, it's still a very, very new area. So what do you think? Like, what is the future of applied theater?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it clearly has a future, because in all applied theatre is saying is that theatre and the performing arts are relevant to our everyday life, and should be more relevant to our everyday life, and should be put at the service of the problems that we face in our everyday life.
Yeah.
So I sort of think it has to be really important for the way people express themselves, the way people tell stories about their lives, the way people problem solve, the way people have an opportunity to be involved in thinking about their everyday life. So it can only be more important in places like India, with the political turmoil that you're currently facing,
Yeah.
with discrimination that exists within your communities, but also my own. I think applied theatre is more relevant than ever.
Right.
I think applied theatre has to understand that it's not one set of techniques. I think the other thing about applied theatre is it's a range of practices.
Yes.
And I think I'm sort of from we would say broad church approach to, I don't know if that doesn't work in India, but the sense of being open to a whole range of techniques and approaches that are as embedded in their local communities as possible. And it might be, and it often is, the type of theatre that is done in different communities is very different.
Yes.
What applied theatre looks like in Kerala is different from what it might look in Kashmir. But they are both attempts at trying to make storytelling, theatre making, performance closely knit in with those communities.
True. Very true. I think the diversity we have in India is sometimes it's a challenge, but sometimes it's also a blessing, because we get a lot of perspectives and different kind of investigations that we do. So we explore a lot of things because of this diversity. But as you rightly said, yes, the efforts need to be taken to reach out to as many organizations, as many people as possible, to help them understand the views of applied theatre. And of course, once the benefits are in place, slowly it will definitely grow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, James, thanks a lot for your time, and I think that's a big opportunity for me to talk to you about our common interest areas. And well, I'll say in this, what is the difficult time is going on, please take care, stay safe, and take good care of yourself. And I wish you good luck for your new book, which is coming up, Performance Care.
Yeah.
Right. So
thank you ever so much.
Yeah, just before we wind up, would you like to say something about your new book?
Yeah, I'm currently working on a book. It will take a little while to be finished. I'm just starting. I've become interested in the way humans look after each other and look out for each other.
Okay.
and care for each other. And I'm trying to explore how the act of looking after each other is actually an art form.
Yeah.
But this is something that artists do when they care for their participants, the young people they work for. Maybe they work with elders, but also there is an art form in the way nurses look out for work with each other, way doctors do. So I'm interested in the art of care, what it means to be a caring human, and the way you care for each other. And I think at the time of the coronavirus, the way humans look after each other
Right.
needs to be worked on. And we need to celebrate those times when it is an art form. People do it with a certain craft and artistry and do it well.
True. True. I think that's a wonderful aspect you're picking up, and it would be interesting to read once your book is out.
Well, I will. I will make sure. I'll work on it. Hopefully next year, maybe
Okay.
as soon as I can.
Well,
Not sure.
we'll wait for it.
Great.
All right. Thanks a lot, James.
No worries, and good luck with all your work. It's nice to see you again.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.